可以看你们的脸吗？
你好，老师，好久不见。
好久没见，好久没见，一个星期没见。
您好，老师。
你好，很高兴看你们的脸。
老师
好，
用这个好了，老师。上星期我没办法跟着你的课，没办法上你的课。
那个软件，对，有一点困难。好，所以我们现在开始。我做了
这里
视
的请
频。
你先点共享屏幕还是说？
这个题目是这个星期我们要讲植物在古代的日常生活。我们看那个象形文字，有很大的一部分是跟植物有关系，有的跟动物有关系，有的跟人有关系。这个星期我们要说植物。So in ancient China, there's a lot of basic. 现在有回音。1、2、3，OK， 会听到吗？
可以。
In ancient China, they had a lot of different pictographs, about 1,000 of them, and they had usually to do with simple things, and a bunch of them had to do with plants. So I'm going to talk about some plants today, only a few plants out of all the plants that actually make pictures. Today I want to talk about the taste of ma. The first I heard about the taste of ma was in California in 1996 from my friend Ann Wu. I had hired her to do some smart robot input for me for my Chinese etymology project. She was from Sichuan and had some stuff she had gotten from her friends in Sichuan. It was a taste I had never experienced. It turned out to be huajiao, which I am sure almost no Americans had ever experienced. Well, not exactly. There are 3 different plants, herbs, that have very similar tastes, but are different. Huajiao, tengjiao, and majiao. Ma means hemp or flax or marijuana or numb. The modern character has a building component, guang or yan, which is actually wrong. It also has a forest component, ling, which is also wrong. It actually comes from han or an, which in this case indicates a scythe used to cut the flax or hemp. The forest part comes from a character pai, which indicates flax or hemp, and that comes from pin, which is actually a stalk of hemp or flax. Flax is a very fibrous plant. You can see the fibers coming off of the plant. Hemp fibers, called cannabis, are used to make canvas. Canvas and cannabis are actually from the same root meaning, hemp. Linen comes from the lin plant, which is now called flax, and this is where we get the words linseed oil and linoleum. In Chinese, it is subject to the variant elimination rule C387. In China, we have many different spices and tastes. One of the most important tastes is called ma la, which actually is 2 tastes. La means hot, as in spicy hot. The whole world knows about the taste of hei hujiao, which we call black pepper, nigrum, and bai hujiao, white pepper. Ma is a taste you are only likely to find in China. Ma is a character in several important plants. In Sichuan, they have a great spice called huajiao, or Xanthoxylum spinifolium. There is also a cultivar of the same species called ma jiao, Xanthoxylum bungianum. There's another species of plant called tung jiao or Xanthoxylum armatum, which is very similar in taste. These spices all have a taste called ma. There is a plant called dama, which can either refer to hemp or marijuana, and a different plant called yama, which is flax. In ancient China, there were two fibrous plants that were used in making fibers and clothes. One was flax, called yama, flax. The other was hemp, called ma or dama. There seems to be a confusion as to the difference between hemp and marijuana. They are both the same species of plant called Cannabis sativa, which means cultivated cannabis. They both have a chemical called tetrahydrocannabinol, 四氢大麻酚, called THC for short. THC is the active ingredient that can get you high. Different cultivars have different amounts of THC. The U.S. government defines hemp as having less than 0.3% THC, which is not enough to get you high. Marijuana cultivars may have as much as 5% to 35% THC. Hemp is a fibrous plant which has been used for thousands of years to make rope and coarse fiber cloth. Canvas and cannabis are derived from the same word. Originally, canvas was made from cannabis. Some varieties have enough THC to get you high, but in most cultivars used for mabu or canvas, it will not get you high. So to recap, yama is flax and dama is hemp or marijuana.
这个没有改变。亚麻大麻没有改变。瓶子。
好了。
所以这个是我们今天要讲的麻。这个麻是很有意思，有很多的汉字是有麻这个字。比如说麻烦或是麻醉，这个可能不是那个字，可是这个麻是常用的字，麻痹。所以这个字很有意思。可是现在的这个字麻椒，这是大麻、亚麻，他们现在常常写错了，所以我们要看原来的那个麻的那个字，因为它原来的逻辑是合逻辑的。我给你看一些。So the word ma, the middle word you see there, it's found in many characters that mean different things, like ma zui means to get high, and ma fan means trouble. It means trouble because it was used, the fibers were used to, the fibers were used in to make cloth and to weave cloth. And when you weave cloth, you have many, many strands. And if it gets messed up, then you have ma fan. Ma fan means the fibers make your head burn. Fan means, if you look at the character, it means to make your head burn. Ma fan means a lot of trouble. So if you come to China, you may see these spices. Huajiao, you'll see very frequently. We have some food here called ma la tang, which means ma and hot soup. It's very popular here in China. We have lots of food on the right that has tung jiao in it. And sometimes you'll see ma jiao, but not so often. So you can take a look at these 3 characters. 你们可以学这3个字。还有你可以看这3个香菜。这个是马，大部分的时候你看左边的是一个简体字，右边的是繁体字。你看现在的那个繁体字、简体字有一个光或是眼。This 光 If you look at it, it used to be a building, a lean-to, an open front building. It used to be pronounced yen, but when they simplified characters, they took a character guang and they simplified it to yen. So this character is sometimes pronounced guang, usually pronounced guang, and but its original pronunciation is yen. And it means a building. But of course, the building has nothing to do with hemp. 在右边我们有林，2个木，这个是森林的林。马，如果你看很多，有一点点像森林，可是它不是森林，它是另外一个植物。林 means forest. And if you see a field of hemp, it kind of looks like a forest, but the plants are much shorter. You'll see many characters that have a han or an. Actually, this character is now pronounced chang, which means factory. It's a simplified form, but it originally meant a cliff. In some places, so it was pronounced Han. But in every character, this Han, it has a different meaning in different characters. In the character for Ma, it means a scythe or a big knife that is used to cut the hemp. 所以这个 Han 现在是一个山坡，以前的时候是一个山坡，现在是一个简体字。本来是工厂的厂，所以这个字有的时候读厂。旁边的是派，你可以看派跟零很像，可是你可以看派，它有2个品。如果你看品在上面，它好像一个木一样，可是它下面有一撇一捺。If we look at the character, we see something that looks like forest, but it's pronounced pai, and it's basically a field of hemp. If we look at one hemp plant, we have pin, and we see that the strokes have names. Pie is a stroke that goes to the left, na is a stroke that goes to the right. But these strokes are, because the plants are very fibrous, you have fibers that come off of the plants. So these are fibers that come off of the plants. 所以如果你看那个简体字，你可以看那个光或是眼，这个是错的。你可以看那个零，这是错的。如果你看简体字也是。上面的光也是错的，可是上面的他们写那个派是对的。那如果你看那个简体字就是旧代的字，你可以看是对的。上面那个蓝色的是一个镰刀，下面是2个派或是2个pin，或是派，就是说 Ma. So if we look at the original character, the blue line indicates a scythe, which is a kind of a big knife used for cutting crops, cutting hemp. And under it, we see something. It is not a forest. It is a field of hemp. So, it's subject to variant elimination rule C387. 所以有没有人有问题？有没有人想问问题？我要看他们的脸。
软件更新了之后你看不见了。
看不见啊。所以我现在关掉。好。我要看他们的脸。
到这边，结束一下。
So 我刚刚跟你说这个字的来源，有没有人有意见？有多少个人收过到吗 ？No， 不要说。Okay. So have any of you eaten 花椒? How many of you have tried 花椒? 有没有人？有多少个人是来过中国？
我来过，老师。
没有。
啊，没有，你们
我来过。
谁来过中国？
我来过。
你来过？
我也来过，老师。
你也来
我也
过？
来过了。
所以你们有没有吃过麻辣的味道？
我有吃过，很好吃。
你是哪个国家？
我是印尼人。
印尼，在印尼他们有花椒吗？
有，现在开很多中国饭店。
哦，以前的时候在美国，我长大的时候没有花椒。
好像是两三年吧，老师。
哦，所以也是在印尼也是很新的。我在美国第一次我看到是我46岁的。现在在美国可能会教到，可是可能美国人还不知道。So, how about other places? Have you had 花椒 or 藤椒? How many outside of China have you had 花椒？在菲律宾有没有？没人回答。你们都睡觉吗？
应该没有老师。
你可以看你的视频，给我看你的脸。所以这个花椒，我觉得这是我最喜欢的。So here in China, I have a bunch of 花椒、藤椒、麻椒, and so I put it in all of my food because I like it. But if you come to China, you can we have lots of restaurants here called Mala Tang restaurants. You can make whatever kind of soup you want, and they put in ma and la. So lots of people like it. So this is the story.
共享屏幕。
所以你们在其他的国家，在美国，在欧洲，特别在印度，印度人都喜欢吃黑胡椒。黑胡椒是 black pepper, or pepper nigrum. 你看那个 NIGRUM，这个是从拉丁话，它是黑色的意思。你看那个字跟一些其他的别的字是黑色的有关系。然后在国外，在美国他们也有白胡椒，white pepper。可是在这个他们说椒，我不知道为什么，因为可能看得起来很像，可是那个植物不一样，所以我们现在在中国有花椒，花是开花的花，麻椒，这个麻椒跟大麻跟亚麻没有直接的关系，我不太清楚为什么他们叫麻椒，可是那个味道会让你的嘴巴觉得麻麻的。还有藤椒，我们在中国有一个酸菜鱼，我们吃那个，他们都会放那个藤椒。So in the rest of the world, I think everybody knows about black pepper,黑胡椒. Especially in India, they always put黑胡椒in everything and spoil it. And bai hu jiao, or white pepper. Here in China, I don't know why they call it jiao, probably because it looks the same. It looks very similar. The seeds look similar. So they call it jiao. We have hua jiao, which is a flower, and a jiao. And then we have ma jiao, which is the same character as hemp or flax. And we have tung jiao. We have another very good thing to eat here in China. It's called suan cai yu. It means sour, suan cai yu. It means sour vegetable fish. And if you get that, they will usually put tung jiao in it, which gives it the flavor of ma. So here we have yama and dama. Yama is flax. So yama is flax. That's what they make linen out of. And linen is L-I-N-E-N. So this word lin, that's a German word, I think, for flax. And you may hear the word linseed oil. A lot of people like that because it's supposed to be healthy. And we have linoleum, linoleic acid, lint. 我们英文有几个字是从 LIN 来的，这个 LIN 的字，大部分的是跟亚麻有关系的，flax。然后大麻看起来完全不一样 ，flax 有7个叶子，大麻，英文有的时候叫 hemp 或是 marijuana hemp 是有THC 比较小 ，marijuana THC 比较多，所以你可以看得出来这两个麻麻烦、麻痹、麻醉。 这个是大麻，在中国我们有大麻，不多，这个是犯法的。在美国是合法的，现在在美国，大麻大部分的就是合法的。我小孩子的时候可以放在监牢好几年。可是这个分别是那个走马步的比较高，是4米高，然后那个 THC 比较小，它长大比较慢，它会走衣服，然后在很多的国家有这个大麻，可是那个另外一个大麻是比较矮，然后它长大比较快，很多的地方是犯法的，然后 THC 是5到35%。
放下一个视频。
对，这个啊，所以我现在我给你另外一个视频，有没有问题？啊，我给你看
没有
另外一个
老师。
啊，我给你看另外一个视频。
Marfar chicken. The first Chinese came to California around 1849 after they struck gold in California. The Chinese came here with the 49ers to work on the railroad and try to get some gold. That is why the Chinese call San Francisco Zhoujingshan, or Old Gold Mountain. That is where the Americans get the word Golden Gate. They were mostly from a place in Guangdong province called Taishan. In local Cantonese dialect, they were called Toisan or Hoisan. They opened a lot of restaurants and sold a lot of food that was kind of Cantonese American food of the time. One of the things you might find in one of these restaurants was something called Marfar chicken. I only recently thought about it. What is Marfar chicken? I Googled it and found this. What is that? I looked up the Chinese and find that it is Ma Hua Ji, which translates as marijuana flower chicken or Mary Jane flower chicken. Okay, when translating things, you can translate them in several ways. We could translate it as hemp flower chicken. I ask myself, this does not look like any marijuana flower to me. In fact, it is not even remotely related to the real Marfar chicken. Where is a marijuana flower or a hemp flower? In China, we have some snacks called xiao ma hua, or little marijuana flowers, and they look like this. I ask again, where are the marijuana flowers? Then I realized that marijuana is hemp, and they make hemp rope out of hemp. And the little eatables look like pieces of hemp rope. Actually, originally it was a hemp knot, and I know it kind of looks like a flower. So it actually means hemp flower. Finally, I found some Marfar chicken, which kind of fits the original description. These are hemp flowers.
可是要放一个 two，要放一个 hemp flower two，后面
那个flower 长什么样子？
待会儿我给你看，这个，对，现在会听到吗？对，所以刚刚那个视频，因为
这个视频很有意思。
可以听到。
哦，好。
视频很有意思。
哦，谢谢。那这个，因为我每个星期上课之前，我要做视频，这个视频是要花很多的时间，我一边要研究，一边要做视频，所以最后的那个麻花剂，你看不到，可能你可以自己 Google 那个麻花剂，看应该是什么样的。可是那个麻花，他们做一个好像仙子一样，然后做一个结子，那个结子好像是一个花一样。So as I teach this class, it's the first class I'm teaching, so I'm making the videos at the same time. So sometimes there's a glitch in the video. At the end, you were supposed to see some mahwaji. And the dough is like curled up into something that looks like a rope, and then is tied into a knot. And so it looks like a flower. It looks like a rope made into a flower. So after 150 years, 在美国，我在美国长大了，因为在美国我离唐人街很远，我听过这个名字Marfar Chicken，可是我从来都不知道是什么东西。虽然我学了汉语，学了好久，我不知道。然后因为过了150年，这个麻花剂它改变了，现在不容易看得出来这个麻花是什么来源。So when I grew up in the United States, I was in a small, all-white town with no Chinese. I heard that in Chinatown they had something called Marfar chicken, and Marfar is certainly not a Chinese character, is not a Chinese word, but it is a Chinese word in Huisanhua or Taishanhua. It's if you speak the old Cantonese dialect in United States, then you'll probably know what it is. In America, the Chinese first went there after the gold rush in 1849, and almost all the Chinese who went there were from a place in Guangzhou province called Taishan, or in Cantonese, Toisan, or in Toisanhua, Hoisan. So they speak a different dialect. Even people from Hong Kong have trouble hearing them. And anyway, 在美国，他们好久，他们对中国人是偏见的，所以去了这些苦工的人来美国，从1880几年之后，他们不让很多的外面的中国人来美国，所以在美国的中国人他们都会讲那个会山话。So for a long time, they were prejudiced against Chinese, and they didn't want Chinese to come to the United States. So when I grew up, if you did find a Chinese, they usually spoke Huisanhua, and they had usually been there for 100 years. In 1970s, maybe before that, people from Hong Kong came to America. So 在1970几年的，如果你去唐人街，他们都会讲广东话，他们听不懂。1970几年的大部分的人听不懂普通话。So in the 1970s, because China was closed for 35 years, and so in the 1970s, if you found a Chinese in Chinatown, he spoke Cantonese, and he probably couldn't speak Putonghua. So So when I first went to Taiwan and learned Guoyu, which is 普通话, I went back to America and I couldn't speak to anybody because on 唐人街他们讲广东话，所以我必须学广东话。So that's the story of Chinese in America. After 1970, 从中国来的人，他们慢慢来。现在在中国，如果你看一个中国人，大部分的中国人会讲普通话。So after the 1970s, more and more Chinese came to the United States, and they came from all over China. So now if you see a Chinese in the United States, he usually speaks 普通话, but not always. Still, many older Chinese speak only 广东话。
为什么呢？
因为我刚刚说的这个历史，1848年的，从1848年的到1948年的来的美国的中国人，大部分的都是惠山人，大部分的是惠山那个广州的那个小地方，他们是做苦工的。
所以他们在这儿那儿他们不说话普通话，他们说话广东话 ，right？
Yeah, a special kind of 广东话 called 惠山话。惠山话 is close to 广东话, but not the same.
这是因为他们不想人们知道他们是中国人。
不是，因为普通话就是最近的几十年，普通话变成全中国的人都会讲普通话。50年以前，很多的人在中国不会讲普通话。然后100年之前，在中国，很可能中国会讲广东话，因为孙中山是一个广东人。可是现在最近100年你明白我的意思吗？
现在我明白。
Yeah,所以共产1949年之后开始，因为香港是开放的，台湾是开放的，所以去美国的很多的广东人，他们讲广东话。在1972年的中国是开放的，所以1972年之后，慢慢开始有很多的中国人从中国大陆来美国，然后慢慢有越来越多的人讲普通话。So 普通話 has not always been the most prominent language in China. There was not long ago, 100 years ago, Cantonese might have become the most prominent language in China. And 50 years ago, there were many people in China who could not speak 普通话. 有没有别的问题？有没有意见？在你那边呢？对，你们都是年轻的人，所以大概不记得几十年以前。我记得几十年以前。好，现在几点
40分。
是。
我可以先休息一会儿，然后再讲。
So let's see.
淘金。
淘金。
对。然后给那个题目录下。
对。
这里。
我给你看另外一个。
好，那这样。
所以你看这个图，这个是这个是150年以前，170年以前，中国人去加州，然后他们的目标是有2个目标，一个是他们大部分的是工人，做苦工的，他们走铁路，可是也有一些人他们要淘金，然后他们是用水，然后要挖起来那个黄金。So in 1849, they discovered gold in California. And so all the Americans went to California, and the Chinese came to California, and the Mexicans came to California, and everybody got rich. And so here's a picture of, in the Qing dynasty, 男人他们都有长头发，他们都有辫子，这个辫子英文叫 Q. In the Qing dynasty, which lasted until 1911, all the Chinese had long hair. In fact, they weren't really Chinese, they were Manchu. It was a law. The Chinese had long braids called queues. And here we have Golden Gate. So San Francisco in Chinese is called Jiujingshan, the old gold mountain. And we have a famous bridge called Golden Gate Bridge. It's Jingmen Daqiao. And 最后一个这个推山唐人街广东省那个泰山市，这是在香港的附近，要过那个九河才可以去泰山。然后美国的唐人街是非常有名的，旧金山的唐人街。唐人街 Tang means Chinese. Tang Renjia, and we call it Chinatown. This is 假的麻花鸡，所以我不给你看。这个是我们刚刚看到的那个小麻花。没有什么特别的，可是你可以看这个有一点像hemp rope, and so that's where it got the name of mahua. I have another picture which I'll show you next time maybe. It's real. It's what mahua ji is supposed to look like.
可能在这里，我给你找一下。下节课吧。
Next class.
Okay.
So let's take a break here for about 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and we'll be back for the second half.
好的，老师。
好，待会儿见。因为全世界都知道加州，可是很多人可能不知道加州的历史。我刚刚说加州的中国人，从1849年开始，我们发现加州有黄金。So I previously mentioned a bit about the history of Chinese in California, but most people, although California is a big place, most people don't know the history. They discovered gold in 1849, and all the white people came to California. Before that, California had mostly Indians, but the Spanish, they came to California in the 1500s. So San Francisco was there and already 300 years old. So in 1848, San Francisco was a Spanish city and already 300 years old. Also, the Russians were there. The Russians came all the way to California. They came mainly to Washington and Oregon. And then the Americans kicked out the Russians, and then they kicked out the Spanish. And they went down to Mexico. And then they came back. So now we have lots of Spanish speakers in California. 所以那个加州旧金山在1849年他们发现黄金在加州，然后白种人都要去加州，中国人要去加州，可是本来在加州大部分的是印第安人可是那个西班牙人已经在那边300年，旧金山是已经有300年的历史，俄国人也在那边。So I will show you a picture of Marfar or Mahua. So this is dough. It resembles hemp rope, and it also resembles, if it's tied in a knot, it resembles a flower. You put this in with the chicken and boil it, and you have mawaji. So now I'll show you the next video. The next video is about art.
Chinese often ask me what is my favorite character. It is a strange question because one character does not get you very far. You need many characters before you can begin to communicate. But some characters are more interesting than others. If you can learn a lot from dissecting a single character, that is good. E is a traditional character for art, but it originally meant to plant crops, which is also a kind of art or technology. So you can see how it might have evolved. Let's look at the character piece by piece. On the bottom, we have a cloud, yun. The ancient form of cloud actually looks kind of like a cloud. What does a cloud have to do with planting crops? Well, weather is important for getting the crops to grow. Now, if we remove the yun, we have the character E. E is the older character for art and also means to plant crops. On the top, we have grass, cao, and on the bottom, we have E, which is yet an earlier character for art and also means to plant crops. The grass indicates that it has to do with crops. There are a couple of hundred characters with cao on top, called grass radicals. It consists of two grass characters, ch. That leaves us with E, pronounced E or shi, which also means art or to plant. It is composed of three components, but two of them are remnants, which I will come back to later. But let's first look at the original character. It consists of a tree, mu, which is being planted in the ground, tu, by a man kneeling with his hands out, ji. So there you have all the logic. The character for art comes originally from the art of planting crops. and was a pictograph of a man planting a tree in the ground. Now we will discuss the remnants. First, you see a remnant lu, which means land. It comes from the more common character lu, which you often see. Now if we go back to E, we see that there are some parts that are written wrongly. These are called remnants. On the left, we have the remnant land, lu. Lu has nothing to do with the original character, but it is found in the character lu, which is the usual character for land. Lu is both a phonetic and a semantic component. The character fu indicates an enclosed area. Lu has the phonetic lu on the top and tu on the bottom. So that explains the character for land. But what about lu, which was the remnant in our first character, E? Remnant 3, lu. We see the remnant lu, which at first appears to come from the components of tu and child, Shu Shen thought it meant a mushroom from lu, and he thought it came from the components grass, ch, and the phonetic liu, which means 6. But he was wrong. After exploring all of the characters that have the component lu, I have come to the conclusion that it is a frog. Tsu means frog. It comes from the character lu and a frog mean. Remnant 4, wan. On the right, we see the component wan, which usually refers to a pill or some round object. It comes from a person, Ren, who appears to be rolling down a hill, Yi, which would indicate something round. Note that the character wan sometimes is written like wan and should not be confused with the character fan. In the character E, it should actually be written ji or ji, which comes from a man kneeling, planting the crops with 2 hands. Now, back to the original character for art. It is subject to the simplification rule B122N, creating the new character E. E is the simplified character for art. From the top part, cao, and the complicated bottom part has been simplified to the phonetic E, which means the heavenly stem, number 2. Aren't Chinese clever? In one character, we can study the whole world. OK， 我们看这个，我刚刚讲的那个那堂课，可能你觉得比较复杂，所以现在我慢慢讲。我们看1号的那个蓝色的是有一个人跪下来，绿色的是一个木，那个棕色的是一个土，所以它是种一个树，它种一个植物。艺术的艺的本意是种田的意思。So we'll start. I'll go slow and we can discuss the components one at a time. If we look at the original character for art, number 1, we see a blue pictograph, which is a man kneeling with 2 hands out, and he's planting a tree, which is green, in the ground, which is brown. If we look at the modern characters,
let's look at the character 1. We have something similar in the modern character. You see those two characters, they both mean E, they both mean art, and they both mean planting, but they've been distorted. On the right-hand side, you see what is actually a kneeling person, but it's the wrong component. It's called a remnant. On the right, you see something, how it should be written. It's kind of like a line. It's got two lines there. And you can see that that's a man kneeling and with his two hands out planting something. 所以你可以看下面的那个 oracle 的那个两个现代的字，那个是繁体字，是艺术的艺。那个右边的，它本来是一个错误，我们说是一个恶变。右边的是它原来的，你可以看是一个跪下来一个人，你可以看他有两个手。So if we go to picture number 2, 你可以看那个木，它有一个恶变，那个不知道是什么东西，可是我们等一会儿会说。那个绿色的就是从一个木的来源，可是它改变了，然后变成乱七八糟的。下面你可以看那个图，右边的你可以看一个鸡。鸡，如果你看这个部分，很多的字有这个部分。它如果你看这个在右边，它一定是一个人跪下来，他有两个手，他是做什么事情？ So if we look at character number 2, we see the green is actually, it's a remnant. It actually comes from a tree, mu, but it's been distorted. So I will talk about the distortion in a minute. In seal characters, if you see that thing on the right in number 2, it always comes from a person kneeling with two hands out and he's doing something. There are many characters with a G on the right-hand side. 如果我们看第三个是现代的字，不是转体字。右边的那个蓝色的，你还可以看得出来，就是一个人跪下来，这个是 G， 他有两个手。可是这个绿色的还是一个木，它有一个恶变，它变成另外一个字。等一会儿我们说那个字。So now part number 3, you see the character in modern form. It's called Kai form. And on the right-hand side, if you see that thing there, it's a G, and it will always be from a kneeling person with two hands who is doing some kind of work. If we go to the next character, number 4, Oman Khan, 他们加了下面加了一个草字头，所以中间是跟草有关系的，所以加一个草字头是合理的。可是那个右边的那个鸡是有一个恶变，它变成一个碗，那个绿色的部分是写错了，所以现在在第4号的。你可以看两个构件是写错了，一个是绿色的，一个是蓝色的。So if we go to number 4, somebody added a 草字头 or a grass radical on top. Since it has to do with planting crops, it's logical. But the blue part has changed into something that's wrong. The blue part is it's a different character. I'll explain it a little later, but it still comes from the kneeling person. 在5号的那个字，他们加了一个韵在下面，因为冬天了是跟天气有关系，所以这个韵是合逻辑的。 In character 5, they added a cloud on the bottom, 云, and since it has to do with planting crops, the weather is important, so it was logical to add a cloud. And so number 5 is the traditional character for art, but it has two components that are wrong. One is the green component and one is the blue component. I will talk about them in a minute.
So
You sure?
all of the character is wrong, actually.
Well,
The modern
when-
character is wrong.
yes.
Yeah.
If we can trace a character back to its most ancient parts, all of the parts should be correct. But as the character evolves over centuries, many characters, parts of the characters they are written wrong. You know, 肚子的肚.
对.
On the left, on the left we have what looks like a moon, but it's actually from roe or meat.
It's a meat.
Yeah. Well, this is true for many characters. And Ishu, the E, is one of them.
Oh.
最后是简化汉这个汉字，他们把下面的因为太复杂，所以他们丢掉。他们放一个 E， 这个字读 E， 它是很简单的。所以你看有一个草字头，如果你认识繁体字，你可能猜出来是艺术的艺，下面是一个标音符号。So when they simplified it, they threw away the bottom part because they thought it was too complicated. They replaced it by a phonetic. And if you knew the old character, you could probably guess the new character. So, 你说?
What's the E there mean? I mean, in the first part, you showed us the E in the simplified form, and then you show us two forms that means plant, crops. What's the meaning of them?
That E comes from a set of numbers called the Tiangan. The Tiangan is the numbers from 1 to 10. Jia Yi Bing Ding Wu Ji Gong Xin Ren Gui. And the E is number 2. And so it basically means 2. It also has a direction meaning, but not much other meaning. But everybody knows that's pronounced E. And so they guess that it's pronounced E.
Okay, now it makes logic to be there.
Yeah, good. So Chinese logic is a little bit complicated.
Yeah.
But if you know the logic of this character, you can learn about 15 other characters and use it when you analyze many other characters.
Yeah.
So, in the character for E, 因为我要完全说这个恶变, because I want to explain all the parts, even the wrong parts, this character is called Lu. It means land. On the right-hand side, you see the modern character for land. 在右边你可以看现代的那个大陆的陆。可是如果我们看那个繁体字，我们看上面的那个不知道是什么东西。这个构建读陆。 如果我们看经文、甲骨文，我们可以看两个东西，两个图形。那个是什么东西？不知道。那个可能是一个人，他跳下来；可能是一个青蛙，他跳下来，他跳上去。So, if you don't know anything about other characters, you can't guess what it is. But if you look at other characters that have this component, you might be able to guess what it is. It's a frog. I looked at all the other characters that have it. Does it look like a frog? Frogs have long legs. But I'll show you some characters that...
Now, I want to see you explain the logic of this. Frogs have to do with water, not with land.
Okay, I will show you. Now, 书生他不知道这个是什么东西，他以为是一个香菇。He thought that it was a mushroom, but he was wrong. He thought that it came from a ch and a liu, but it actually comes from a word for frog, chu. You see on the top, it means frog. On the bottom, you have a word for frog. On the top, you have something. If we go back and look at the original character, maybe you can convince yourself that it's a frog. If you can't convince yourself that a frog, there's two other characters. There's tiao, there's ling, which means to jump over, and there's lu, which means to jump over. But I don't have those characters here. I will send them to you in the Weixing. So there are three characters in which this character lu means to jump. And I'll send those other characters to you, but right now I only have the one character, frog. And so if you look at the ancient character, it will look like a frog on the bottom and a frog on the top. They are doing leapfrog. One, 这个不是 one， 这个 one， 这个是 lu，
这是你要加哪个
one
啊？就这个。
Okay, I have to fix this. I will show you the ancient character. Let's look in the upper left-hand corner. Oman Khan 上面左边的这个字读 one， 我没有写那个转体字，可是如果你看那个转体字，它是一个人，然后一个下坡的，好像是那个人滚下去的。所以如果你看那个古代的汉字，你可能相信我，这个是一个 pill， 一个圆的东西可以滚过去。可是你可以看那个不是右边的那个鸡。这个古代的 lu， 我等一会儿，我可以在我们的微信的，我可以给你那个古代的，你可以思考。So in the upper left-hand corner, we have one, which is the right-hand part of the modern character, but it's wrong. If you look at the ancient character, it actually means something round that can tumble down a hill. If you look at the correctly written character for crop, then you can see that it looks more like a kneeling man with two hands. So this is the end of my pictures. Let's talk about Any questions or comments? I will try to find a picture to show you. But any questions or comments? No? Oh, okay. Here's a picture of,
啊，没，你先结束这个事。
哦，
Wait.
对，
here's a picture of
晚
one. And if you see on the right-hand side, there's a hill. Looks like a hill. In the inside, you have a person pointing left, facing right. Yeah, facing right. So this indicates a person falling down a hill. It means something round, something that rolls. This is the wrong character. And 你可以叫一个鸡，
鸡，
对，
鸡哪个鸡？
然后这个鸡，
哦，
这个 the correct character is in number 2, or in number 1. You see a kneeling person with 2 hands. In number 2, you see it's been distorted, but it's still a kneeling person with 2 hands. In number 3, it's still been distorted, but you can still see it's a kneeling person with 2 hands. But in number 4, huh?
我们不可能看，
你不会，
对
因为
对，
因为眼睛有矛盾。
因
不是老
为
师，
不是
屏幕没有共享。
哦，不能看哦，好，对不起，好。
没事吗？
OK， 我再说一次。OK， 在第一个字，你可以看一个跪下来一个人，他有2个手。第二个字，你可以看，如果你思考一下，你可以看一个跪下来一个人，他有2个手。这个是个转体字。在第3个字，如果你思考一下，你可以看一个跪下来一个人，他有2个手。可是第4个字有一个矛盾，这个是另外一个字，它改变了，所以变成一个完，我刚刚说的那个字。我现在给你看一个。So now do you see the connection?
现在我可以。
好。So here we have a picture of G. You have a man with 2 hands, and 有的时候是右边，有的时候是左边。转体字是第3个，你可以看它还是有2个手指，2个手。然后现代的 G， 如果写对的话，就是第4个最右边的。好。
下面往下面，哎，对，这样是对的。
好。
离远一点，哎，对，哎，对，
好，
这样是对的。
好。所以你可以看，古代的人，他们写一个图形，他们不是每次完全一样的。So when the ancients, when they wrote a character, it was not always exactly the same. But if you knew about Chinese characters, you could tell that they were the same. Sometimes it faced right, sometimes it faced left. And the Zhuangtizi, the third one, If you should be able to tell that it's two hands, a man kneeling with two hands. And the fourth one on the furthest right, if you see this in any character, it always has something to do with a kneeling person with two hands doing something. In fact, if you see the one in a character, it's a mistake, but it still usually indicates a kneeling person. 有没有问题？有没有人要说话？
没有老师。
所以艺术的艺合不合逻辑？
现在我可以我可以明白，但是有点复杂。
有一点复杂。
我觉得有点复杂。
我这个不像黄道那么复杂，对不对？
对。
所以如果你看这个几次，你可以理解它的全部的逻辑。So this
老师，
你说。
老师，不好意思，我可不可以邀请老师再讲一下那个为什么“义”字下面有圆那个部分？老师，
云，
刚才我没听清楚啊。
因为它的本意是种田的意思。His original meaning was to plant crops. 所以跟天气有关系。云是代表天气，所以你种田的
我明白这个，但是我不明白为什么花云像的汉字，因为云是下，不是上。
Oh.
I don't understand why they draw the cloud from the bottom of the card. Yeah, because yun should be at the front to water the crops, right?
Well, 这个你不要太固执的。When analyzing Chinese characters, try to be more flexible because they are just components. They are not always in the correct place.
Right.
So, yeah, so 草字头, the grass is always on top.
Yeah.
It's not logical, but it makes it easy to look up in the dictionary.
For me, it's logical because grass is on the earth, right? It's outside of the earth, but you to be at the top of the bottom of the character, that doesn't make any logic.
Yes, but you have to be more flexible when looking at Chinese characters.
现在我明白，谢谢老师。
对，好，有没有别的观点、意见、问题？中国人聪不聪明？
很聪明。
很聪明。
聪明。
Yeah. And 我觉得你看一个汉字，很多的汉字，如果你理解它的来源，你可以理解中国人的历史，你也可以理解古代的人的日常生活的是什么样。
我觉得你说的对，但是很多中国孩子不知道这个故事，所以我觉得这个汉字没有逻辑，如果我们不知道故事。
对，有很多的汉字，如果你不知道它的故事，也不知道它的逻辑，你没有办法。如果这个艺术的艺，如果我给一般个中国人看这个字，他们不会告诉我是什么意思。如果我跟他们说，他们应该很快会明白。可是很多的汉字是没有人知道，有一些汉字是没有人知道。我可以告诉你大部分的汉字的故事，可是有的故事没有人知道。So modern Chinese, the Chinese characters have changed very, very radically. 你说
They change a lot over the time, right? And
Yes.
that's
Yeah, so Chinese characters have changed radically since they were pictographs. So modern children, in many cases, cannot understand the logic because they did not live in the ancient world. Once the child gets to be about 10, he knows enough about the ancient world that he should be able to understand every character. But some characters, nobody knows the answer. Most characters, I can tell you the answer because I've been looking at it for a long time. But some characters we don't know, and some characters people will disagree. 有没有人有意见？有没有人有问题？其他的字吗？我们要聊聊天，我们还有多久？我们还有15分钟，所以你可以问我。对，你说。
Does that mean that the character become different and become complicated because they don't know the ancient times, how they use that? So
Two problems. Two problems. 那个艺术的，你给我看艺术的艺。
汉典吗？
汉典可以。有两个问题。如果你看一个现代的图，如果你不知道它的来源，你不知道是什么意思。这个繁体字。
Because the first time it's more logic, but after times and after changing become more complicated and hard to understand.
要看哪一块，我可以给你放大。一个是。
对，if you look at this character，对。If you don't know, for instance, 草字头, if you don't know the top part comes from grass, you can't guess. But if I show you it comes from grass, then it's quickly logical. 如果你不知道上面的，如果你第一次看上面的，你猜不出来跟草有什么关系。可是如果我告诉你，然后我给你看原来的字，然后它的演变，这个部分是变成合逻辑的。So if you know the logical origins of each part, then it makes it easier to understand the character. But if you're a modern Chinese child, it's very difficult. Because the modern Chinese child doesn't understand what it was like to live in ancient world. 你可以给我个零，
哪个零？
一个挑的那个零，上面有 上面有绿，上面有角。
上面有绿，下面有，OK。这个吗？啊，
嗯。This character this character now means to dawdle. It originally meant to jump. On the top you see a 驴, on the bottom you see a foot. 那个下面的是 du 随。如果下面的你看这个部分都是一个脚。If you see this bottom component, it's always a foot, and it has something to do with motion. The top part I told you was a frog. So let's go down to see the frog. Okay. So if we look at the more ancient character, we see a man with a foot on the bottom. And on the top, we see that thing that I told you was a frog. Maybe you still don't believe me, but it's a frog. The frog has long legs and it's jumping. This character means it's pronounced ling and it means to jump. It originally meant to jump. 我现在这个字读零，下面有一个人，你可以看它有一个脚，上面是一个青蛙，所以这个是代表它会跳的，它的本意是跳。现在我给你看另外一个字。处
哪个处？
那个。That character for frog is rare. It's hard to find. But here we are. Okay. So I mentioned this character here. It means frog. On the bottom, we see a frog. 在上面是一个青蛙，在下面是一个青蛙。我现在给你看那个原来的图片。这个下面，如果你用你的想象力，你可以知道这个是一个青蛙。上面的，你可以看下面有两个脚，上面有两个手。下面是一个青蛙，上面也是一个青蛙。So this is the second character that means to jump. A toad, a frog can jump. There's another character, if I can find it.
哪个路？
一个竹字旁一个路，
竹字旁。
对，一个脚字旁。
马字旁。石字旁。足字旁，是这个。
对。 So this character, it means on the left-hand side, we see a ju, which is a foot or a leg. And on the right-hand side, we see a lu, and it's actually a frog jumping over some dirt. If we look at the ancient character,这个没有古代的字，可是如果分析汉字，如果有一个想法，这个汉字这个构建是什么意思？我们要看其他的汉字有这个构建，然后看合不合理的。So if we don't know what the symbol is, we want one way to figure it out is to look at all of the other characters that have the same symbol and see if they have something in common. So with this character, I looked at all of the characters with Lu, and all of them have something to do with jumping. So I conclude that, or jumping or frogs. So I conclude that it's a frog. That's my theory, but I don't think anyone has a better theory. So not everybody will agree with me, but when I say something, I can usually give them evidence. 有很多的专家学甲骨文、经文的专家，很多的专家他们会背很多的古代的字。可是他们不会思考这个字的原来的图形是什么意思，所以每一个研究古代汉字的，他们有他们自己的特殊。There are many experts in ancient Chinese. Many of them, they simply remember the characters and try to read the stories. But they don't ask what the pictographs mean. So different people study different things about ancient Chinese, and not everybody overlaps. 有不同的专家，他们大部分的汉字，别的专家都会同意跟我的分析方法，因为大部分的汉字是大家都同意，可是有一些汉字是不同的专家有不同的观点。So with Chinese characters, most characters, everybody agrees on the origin, and the experts will all agree with me. But some characters, everybody has different, experts have their own opinion and have their own reasons for believing it. 所以汉字是这样子。有没有别的意见、问题？ Anybody want to say anything, ask any questions?
非常感谢老师。以
谢谢你们。
前我不明白为什么这个是 frog， 但是现在我越来越熟悉，所以我可以看到。
很好，很好。如果你有别的意见，我跟你说，今天有一个朋友他问我，为什么给他们那么难的、那么复杂的汉字？为什么不跟他们说母、马、牛？因为我觉得每一个一年级的学生都知道马、牛，语这个没有意思。So one of my friends said, "Why are you teaching them such complicated words?" And my friend says, "Why don't you teach them the word for cow and horse and fish?" And I said, "Because everybody knows them. They're not complicated. You can't, anybody can learn them anywhere. But I want people to realize that every character has its logic, if you can find it.
老师，你可以告诉我骄傲的故事？
对，骄傲的故事，骄傲的故事，那个周边的我还没有准备那个原来的图形，可是周边的那个你可以看一个，等一会儿我可以看一看，能不能找到？骄傲的骄傲的这个。
一个字是吧？
对，
骄，
不是骄傲的傲。
我来给你找。
对，你问的骄傲的骄，或是骄傲的傲？骄傲的骄。
骄傲的骄。
骄傲的骄很简单的，是一个马，常常很骄傲。
对，但是为什么用这个马？写这个意思，表示这个意思。
因为一个马，古代的人，你有没有听过伊萨普 ？Have you heard of Aesop?
Aesop, yes.
没有。
Aesop's fables.
对，但是我不知道，我听过简，但是我不阅读这个故事。
古代的人，全世界的古代的人，他们看动物，他们以为动物是有聪明的或是笨的。他们看一个 jackal，古代的印度人，他们以为这个狗是非常聪明的。他们看狐狸，他们以为狐狸是非常聪明的。有的，他们看牛，他们觉得牛是很笨的，所以他们说牛头。牛头 in Chinese, a cow head means somebody who's stupid. 所以古代的时候，每一个动物，它有它自己的精神，它有它自己的 personality。一个马有的时候是非常骄傲的，所以一个马可以代表骄傲，也可以代表很壮，也可以代表很快。那个右边的桥，这个是一个标音符号，所以马有的时候很骄傲的。如果你骑过马，他们很难控制，有的时候他们有自己的意见。So
对，我知道，因为我喜欢骑马。
Oh, so in the ancient world, if you've read Aesop's fables, you will see that the Greeks, they had a different idea about animals. Each animal, some were considered smart, some were considered dumb. In Chinese, we say Nyoto, that's a person with a cow head. That's somebody who's stupid.
我明白，老师。
Yeah.
But right now, new is for something that is good. 牛很厉害。
牛很厉害? Yes.
这是什么意思？
现代汉语中牛很厉害，就比如那个牛。
哦，牛逼，对。对，牛逼很厉害，对。Yes. 这个很有意思。如果你看原来的 Aesop's Fables， 公元前700年，它代表动物的，他说动物的故事是非常不一样，跟现在的完全不一样。所以现在中国人说很牛，这个有的时候他们说牛逼，
牛逼，
这个是对，这个是
牛逼有什么意思？
牛逼有什么意思？
你可以自己查
你写信给我，我可以告诉你。这个是牛的一个，你写信给我，可以告诉你。骄傲。
哦，你要讲傲吗？
对，骄傲是很有意思。也是不容易。这个骄傲的，我有别的地方是可以看他的经文甲骨文。
我可以
这个不是这个，不是人字旁的骄，对，
是哪个？
不是人字旁，是没有人字旁。
没有人字旁的我来给你找。
对。We'll see if we can find 骄傲的傲。So 骄傲 means proud.
对。
A horse is proud.
他再往前。对。
我们看这个。
好，就这样对。
如果我们看经文，是一个手，它有一个，它关一个人上面，可是那个人的上面有什么东西我们不知道。如果我们看这个字，一个手来关一个人，这个人的上面，他的古代的中国人，他们有的时候有羽毛在他们的头发里面。So the man on the right, we can think that maybe that man is proud because he has a fancy headdress and a fancy hat. And so this is probably the best explanation. Is the man on the right he thinks he is beautiful. He has a fancy hat with flowers on it.
好的，谢谢老师。
So it's interesting that one thing when we think about the ancient world, we need to think about animals. You know, in America, we have the eagle. The eagle represents Americans. The eagle is strong. The eagle is a totem. But what animal represents Chinese?
OK. 这是小猫？
No. What animal represents Chinese? All Chinese are descendants of this animal.
Dragons.
A dragon, yes. Very good, yes. So Chinese are descendants of the dragon, but every culture has a connection with an animal. And we can think about this in the future.
For Romania is the wolf.
A wolf. Oh,
Wolf,
I have a
yes.
story. In Romanian, how do you say wolf?
Loop.
Huh?
Loop.
Loop?
Loop. Loop.
Look. Okay. In Russian, they say volk. In Polish, I think they say wolf. In German, in English, it goes to wolf. In Southern American dialect, it goes to woof, as in woof, woof.
对。
It's true. Well, anyway, it's about time to close class today. So, 下一次我可以跟你讲植物。
老师，
下一次我
我有
老师，
最好的问题，我保证是最好的问题。今天，
好。
你有没有 多的视频，你给我们看。你有没有在 YouTube 上面？
我现在因为我开始教这堂课，我也是同时开始做视频，所以我们做了多少个视频
？30个。
30个，我们拍了多少？我们放了多少？
我们放了大概7个。
7个。啊，我可以放多一点的，我的 YouTube 可能有多一点的。对，我可以放多一点。然后，你写信给我，然后我告诉你这个牛逼是什么意思。
OK，谢谢。
好，下一个星期见。
再见，老师。